welcome to The Charm of It, where I discuss pursuing coziness while living in a white supremacist capitalist patriarchy in need of toppling. If you're a returning viewer, it is so wonderful to see you again. And if you're a new viewer, I'm really glad that you found your way to my little corner of the internet. If you enjoy listening to people deep dive into their hobbies, then you're in the right place. I'm Eva, a chronically ill, endlessly curious disabled knitter who uses she, her pronouns. I live with my partner Joel and an assortment of pets within sight of Lake Ontario on Haudenosaunee homeland, specifically that of the Keepers of the Western Hill, the Onondaga, known to settlers as the Seneca. Excuse my pets in the background. European settlers moved into this land after a series of ethnic cleansing movements ordered by George Washington during the Revolutionary War, and that is why I am here. But despite all of this violence against them, the Haudenosaunee continue, and their consensus-driven democracy that they had already established far before George Washington and the Founding Fathers continues to this day, and their Grand Council is in fact the oldest governmental institution in North America. Today I will be talking about knitting and my works in progress, finished objects. I have a quote or two to share with you from a book that talked about fiber arts. And for my topic, I'll be discussing how you organize your knitting works in progress. I'll also be answering a few questions from followers over on Instagram. So, let's get started. This is Thistle, in case you don't know. Oh, that's Nessie, and Moth is the kitty in the cat house. So, the only pet that is not in view is my corn snake Nutmeg. She's the best behaved of everyone, let's be honest. Okay, so my first finished object is the one I'm wearing, my bunny sweater. And this was based on the William pattern by Anne Kingstone from Stranded Knits, which is here. You can go. Although, as you can tell, I changed a few things because the pattern is for a long-sleeved woolen sweater, and I knit a short-sleeve cotton sweater. It goes up to a 58-inch bust, and Anne Kingston has spoken out both about racism in the knitting community and has started offering her patterns on a separate platform for those who can no longer use Ravelry because of their problematic update. So she is a designer that I am comfortable supporting by name. And that's a relief. Sorry, I just noticed where one of the pets had caught a piece of yarn. Anyway, that's a relief because I love her patterns. This is the second sweater of hers that I've knit. The other one is Swans. And what I love about, in particular, her animal designs is that they have a very arts and crafts William Morris type aesthetic, which is right up my alley. And so I have been meaning to knit this for a long time. I got that book years ago after I knit the Swan sweater. There you go. Now you can see Nessie a bit better. I apologize in advance if the sound of her chewing is quite loud, but that's like how she stays out of trouble. Anyway, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to make it a cardigan or how I was going to adapt it because I overheat in woolen pullovers. And finally I decided that I had this organic cotton yarn in my stash and I might as well just knit up a t-shirt. And so this was kind of an experiment for me, and it has worked out so well. I love this sweater. I wear it so often. As you can see, I did it with quite a bit of positive ease. The pattern is written for 2 inches of positive ease, but I think I went up a size or 2, so I probably have at least 4 inches. I did, though, so I used the pattern for the rabbits, and I did end up using her neckline. A lot of the Ravelry knitters end up having problems with this neckline, so I cast on provisionally and did the rabbits and then did the neckline at the end. And first I tried doing tighter ones, but I actually really liked how the looser one looked. I've got quite broad shoulders, and I don't know, it felt good. This is pretty much it at its loosest. I've worn this a few times since the last time I washed it. So it starts out snugger and then slowly drapes as cotton is prone to do. But it works for me. If you do want a snugger neckline, and Kingston has added directions to the PDF, and then you can also access that if you have the book. And then there are several people over on Ravelry who talked about what they did. For the body, I used a different gauge. The pattern calls for a much bigger gauge, I think, in stockinette than in the stranded. And I just used pretty much the same gauge, so I went up 2 needle sizes since I'm a bit snugger in my stranded knitting. And I decided to experiment with a looser silhouette, so I will insert a video of me standing so that you can see. And it's loose and cropped, which is very trendy right now in the online knitting world, but I'm not sure if it's for me or not. I'm not really sure that I have a lot of bottoms that I like with this, but I haven't tried wearing it just over a poofy dress yet, which is how a lot of people wear it. The good thing is I have almost 50 grams of yarn left over, so I think I might just lengthen it, and then it'll be easier to wear with like my skinnier trousers without worrying about flashing my midriff. So I'm wearing it over a camisole today. But yeah, I definitely want to knit more short sleeve pullovers like this out of plant fiber so that I can wear them without overheating, even when I'm using my heating pads. And I actually got some yarn on D-Stash to do an adaptation of that antler cable sweater from the Fauna magazine that I already have knit into a pillow once, but now I can knit it into a sweater. So very much looking forward to that. And yeah, I'm so delighted to have a rabbit sweater. Rabbits have a lot of very interesting kind of trickster and mythological associations with them, as do hares. And so I'm very fond of them for that reason. They're associated with the moon in different societies as well. And who doesn't love the moon? So for my next finished object, I'm going to talk about a pair of socks. I knit a lot of socks while I was on podcasting break, so I figure I'll just talk about them every once in a while until we get through them. But first I'm going to put Thistle down because I've got a heating pad on my hips and she is overheating. There you go, girly. Okay. Oh, and this book is out of print, but you can just buy a copy of this pattern, the William pattern. She also did one for children called Sweet William digitally. So these are the Ushak socks, I believe. Look at that cuff. I love it so much. And you can see I finally got sock blockers. Years of knitting and podcasting, but I decided to go ahead and do that. So these are from the Silk Road sock patterns, or book, sorry, by Hunter Hammerson. I've been knitting more out of books. And this is the first edition. She's released a second edition. And so then I found a used copy of this on eBay quite affordably, which is great because I love pretty much all the patterns in here. So I've been slowly knitting my way through it. So this is the Ushak pattern. And the patterns in this book include a little bit about the specific kind of rug traditions that she was inspired by. And so let's see. Ushak rugs combine brown, yellow, and rust color schemes with a characteristic floral motif. And Ushak is a city in eastern Turkey. So I actually made a bit of a mistake in reading this chart. Ooh, and you can tell I get holes in my gussets, which I never used to, but only on one side. That's odd, isn't it? Anyway, the chart for the bodies is supposed to be mirrored, but somehow in my brain I conflated the two charts, and so instead of having mirrored socks, mine are the same, and these slip stitches just alternate on every column. So the body pattern was a little bit fiddly, but not too bad, and it would have been less fiddly if I hadn't messed up the chart that way. The cuff pattern was very fiddly, but it was only a few rounds, and I absolutely love how it looks. I knit these socks pretty tall for me because I wanted this cuff to stick out of my ankle boots. And I knit them in this purple color, mainly because I'm really going through a purple phase, but also I just thought that, I don't know, this was a great combination of pattern and sock. I wanted to make sure that this slip stitch texture was visible, so I didn't want to use too dark of a pair of socks, or sorry, too dark of a color. And let's see, I did my own heel and toe, which I do on pretty much every sock that I knit. I don't even look at the pattern toes most of the times, to be honest, or heels. Hunter Hammerson, her patterns often have heels that correlate to the body of the sock, which I love aesthetically, but then they don't often have slip stitches, and I really prefer having that reinforcement of the slip stitches there. So that's why I changed it. And yeah, as I said, these went quite quickly and I loved knitting them, and I'm having a really great time knitting my way through this book. If you wish to join me, the next pair of socks I plan to knit from it are the Offshari, I believe. Let me double check. Page 69. Yes. So I'm going to knit these, and then, oh, pets. I'm going to knit these next. If anyone would like to join me, that will probably be in a couple of weeks. I'll cast those on. Maybe 1 week. We'll see. And so this version of the book, almost everything is one size, and you adjust the sizing with gauge, which in my opinion is not ideal, because with socks you really want a nice snug fabric. So if you go up in needle sizes, then you're kind of sacrificing how hard wearing the fabric is. But her newest edition, I think, has multiple stitch counts and is much more size inclusive. So that's great. And Hunter Hammerson, in general, on her blog, is very outspoken about being against white supremacy and Donald Trump and all those kinds of things. So once again, I feel comfortable supporting her as a designer. Although, yeah, she has the most adorable little stuffed things too, and now she's doing a series of like a knitted village. Oh, I want it, but I don't think I want to knit it. Always the dilemma. My final finished object for today, and I am sorry about how dark the couch behind me is. Hopefully when it's not winter, there will be enough light. If I turn on the lamps, then the lighting balance gets all strange, and my face gets very blown out. So instead, you can barely see the pet antics, which I know some of you are here for. Okay. So my last finished object is another pair of shorts. So I knit myself a pair of bloomers 2 years ago, maybe, using a different pattern, and I love them. I knit them because I have rheumatoid arthritis, and it's particularly bad in my hips. And I had read an article about how wearing wool over affected joints might help pain. So that's why I wanted to wear them. And I do find that that's the case. I think it really, excuse me, not only does it kind of help a little bit with my joint pain, but it also provides another layer of fabric between my skin and the heating pads that I use for my pain, which is good because I've been having some problems lately with burns and that kind of thing. So I decided that I could really use another pair just so that I could wash them more frequently. And I decided to try out the Ripple Butt Shorts pattern by Jessie May Designs, and I love it. So the pattern is written for DK weight yarn, and I happen to have a skein in my stash, and I knew that Ravelry considered it a DK weight. So I just started knitting with it. And when I got to about here, I realized that there was no way it was going to last the entire shorts pattern. So I sped up my increase rate because I was hoping to get to the leg divide with this main color so that it would look a bit intentional. And luckily that worked out fine. So my rise is a little shorter than the pattern calls for. I think it's around 8.5 inches versus 10, but that's still really comfortable for me. And then I just used this contrast color for the legs. And when I looked it up later, it turns out even though this yarn is listed as a DK weight, the yardage is really worsted. So it took 225 yards of the main and 48 of the contrast. The only other modification I made, then speeding up the increases was I did a crochet chain drawstring instead of I-cord because I-cord is not my favorite thing to knit. I'm considering making little pom-poms for the end, but I'm not sure if that would affect the clothes I could wear it under, so I have not done that yet. I loved this pattern. Here's the back. This was my first time doing German short rows, and the way that she described it, I was able to do it just from reading her instructions. I didn't have to look up any tutorials. She also had a couple really interesting increases and decreases that were new techniques to me, and once again, her descriptions were enough for me to follow, and I really liked the result. I love it when designers pay attention to those tiny details. I also love the folded over waistband, although next time I would definitely, so I didn't make my drawstring beforehand, and next time I would, just so that I can put the drawstring in while I'm doing the joining round. I'm not sure if there's a more technical name for it, because instead I had to thread mine through afterwards, and that was really fiddly. I imagined I could just use a yarn needle, but that did not work out. So I ended up using a stitch marker, I think. So yeah, I really love these, and I have enough of this solid color to make a matching camisole, and there's a tiny ball of this left, so I'm going to knit a little bow to put in the center of the camisole, and I'll be using another Jessie May design pattern. And I plan to knit myself some more of these. Also, my mother has requested a pair, so I'm sure that you will see me knit quite a few pairs of these in the future. I really like Jessie May as a designer because her patterns are very size inclusive. Excuse me. I really like Jessie May as a designer because her patterns are very size inclusive. They are well written, they're fun to knit, and the directions also are very kind of class inclusive as far as suggesting different yarns at different price points. So I really like supporting her work, and I would like to do a giveaway of the Ripple Butt Shorts pattern. So if you have been wanting to knit this, but you don't have the spending money, oh, and she does a sliding scale for her patterns, which I think is great too. Anyway, if you would love to knit this pattern, but you don't have a lot of money to spend, like a lot of spare money to spend, feel free to enter the giveaway, or just for fun. I remember there was a long period in my life where buying knitting patterns was not economically not something I could do very frequently. And now I'm at a more economically secure point in my life, and I would just like to pass along all the generosity that I've experienced over the years from knitters giving something away. So I'll be giving away a pattern every month. This time it's the Ripple Butt Shorts. If you would like to enter that, then I think I'm going to just do comments here on YouTube, because I know that Ravelry is no longer accessible to everyone. And if you don't have a YouTube account, but you do have an Instagram account, then you can message me on Instagram as a DM. I'm the charm of it over there as well, and you can enter that way. But comments on YouTube would be the easiest for me. So those are my finished objects for this episode, at least. And I think I will go ahead and answer a media question first. A viewer question from Jo. So she asked about my social media break as well as book recommendations. Well, and now that I am podcasting again, one of the things I plan to do is alternate between discussing knitting one week and books the next. So you'll be getting plenty of book recommendations, and I'm so glad that you enjoyed Talia Hibbert. I love her. So tune in next week for that. And as far as my social media break goes, I originally started it because I was trying to take care of myself and my partner Joel and the pets, as well as plan for what to do in the event that Donald Trump tried to lead a coup after the election, which, as I record this, on January 5th. Anyway, so I wanted to have my energy and time, my spoons, if you're familiar with chronic illness speak, devoted more to offline pursuits. And I did that, and I think I created a really good rhythm and routine that has the household kind of taken care of and leaves me a bit of free time again. And so then I started wondering about how I wanted to be on social media, and if there was a way to do a knitting podcast where it aligned with my values, because I worry about, I don't want to create a podcast that just encourages people to buy things in the kind of hyper consumption, capitalist kind of vein that I think can be a really common pitfall of 21st century society. And so I was mulling that over, and then I started watching knitting podcasts again. I had taken a break from watching them because I also just, for a lot of the year, I did not feel like knitting. And I realized that when I watch knitting podcasts, I don't feel the need to run out and buy things. What I want to do is knit more and try new techniques and play with things. And so I realized that as long as I focus my podcast on that aspect of knitting and less on the shopping aspect of knitting, then I think that I can do it in a way that reflects my values and hopefully also provides entertainment, because I know that knitting podcasts fill me with such joy. Being able to turn one on and listen to someone else talk about such a wonderful hobby while I knit myself on the couch, it's lovely. So that's what I did during my social media break, and I was imagining how I was going to engage with Instagram as well. And so what I've decided, and you might have noticed, is that I'm not going to name most of the yarn that I've used. I just don't feel the need to give those brands more exposure. The exception will be if I've bought yarn from small businesses whose values I support, and you'll see that I have some of those coming up. And then as far as designers go, I will vet any designers. Like, I had to do some Googling for Anne Kingston today before mentioning them on the podcast. And I will only mention them if I'm sure that their values align with mine. Otherwise, I just will skip over that part. And I'm going to be doing a giveaway every month of a design by a BIPOC designer. And yeah, so those are the kinds of things that I envision going forward with my podcast. As you might have noticed, I've tweaked my introduction a little. Please let me know. Please feel free to call me in whenever I'm doing anything wrong. I have a lot of privilege, and I'm sure that I will make mistakes. And I'm very grateful to anyone who takes the time to either leave a comment or message me on Instagram or email me. My email is also thecharmofit@gmail.com in order to educate me. I know that is labor for you, and I just want to give a shout out in advance for that. Oh, the other thing that I am changing about my podcast too is that I will have closed captions from now on, because I really want to be more accessible and more disability friendly. I am disabled, and for a long time I've been worried about subtitling things because my hands start to hurt if I type too much. But I've decided that if that means I can only do 2 podcasts a month instead of 4 podcasts a month, I would rather do that and have them subtitled and more accessible. And I am doing fewer Instagram posts now so that I can include image descriptions, which is something else that I was not great at before. And I have found an app that will subtitle Instagram stories, so I might be doing more videos over there. But yeah. So those are the kinds of things that I've been mulling over during my social media break. And as I kind of mentioned when I was talking about the giveaway, I'm in a more economically secure place than I've ever been in my adult life. And I really want to make sure that I'm passing that along. Does that make sense? I want to make sure that I'm not hoarding, and that I'm sending my good fortune, which in most cases is related to my privilege, back out into the universe and helping to rebalance things, as opposed to just kind of keeping it all. me. I hope that made sense. Having to subtitle my thoughts is going to make me never want to podcast. Oh, and now the pets are all wrestling behind me. Got 3 works in progress, 2 pairs of socks and a sweater, so I'll start with the socks. These are pretty much a finished object, but I haven't blocked them yet. So, work in progress. These are the Tomton socks, which are a test knit for Fox and Folk over on Instagram. I saw her call for test knitters, and I thought it was such a fun design. And I test the children's medium because I have a 6.5-year-old in my life who needs warm feet. And Fox and Folk went with like very traditional, cozy cottage, kind of old world colors, which I loved. But this particular child is a much more kind of contemporary kid. So that's why I went with the teals and purples and a little bit of white. And this pattern, it definitely kept me on my toes. There are a couple rounds that have 3 colors at once. And then the short row heel used German short rows, which was only my second time. The first time was those butt shorts. I love them, by the way. I think they'll be my default short row from now on. And then, of course, there's this 2-color Latvian braid, which I had done Latvian braids one other time, but it was 1 color, and it was years ago. So luckily, the pattern included links to a tutorial, but it still took me a little bit to wrap my brain around. And the primary color yarn, this really fun variegated yarn, is from Birch Hollow Fiber Arts, which is a Black-owned yarn dyeing company. And I bought it from Dawn Landix's new shop, Knit Yarn Stuff, which is also a Black-owned business. And she is providing the coolest kind of knitting accessories as well as some yarn. So I am delighted to be able to support her. And I bought 2 skeins of this, mainly to knit hats. But when I realized I was going to be knitting some socks for this child, I thought that this was just the perfect colorway. And I happen to have some dark purple and cream leftovers. So yeah, I had my friend measure their feet, but I still ended up having to rip back because the first time I knit the foot too long, because that just seems like such a small foot. So once I block it, I will give them to her and hopefully they fit. Let's see, is there anything else? I guess since it's a work in progress, but I'll try to get some pictures of them on her next time. And I'm going to knit myself some Tomton socks as well because they were a lot of fun. I don't think I've knit many patterns where there's a lot of complicated stuff at the beginning and then kind of smooth sailing stockinette for the rest. I think that that's probably why people enjoy top-down sweaters, which is not the way that I usually knit sweaters. But I can see the appeal. It was really nice. Speaking of sweaters, this is my current sweater project. It's for me. Oh, I love it so much. So this is a sweater that I'm designing myself using the cluster quilting pattern, which I believe is from a Barbara Walker Stitch dictionary, but you can also find it on knittingfool.com for free. And it's a slip stitch pattern, 2-color knitting, obviously. And yeah, I love it. This is one of my favorite shades of pink, and then just adding the cream on top. It feels like something out of Sofia Coppola's Marie Antoinette or something. The funny part is I swatched with these 2 yarns, and I knew that I wanted to do a slip stitch pattern, but I wasn't sure which one. So I swatched a couple. And when I swatched this one, I loved how it looked, but I also worried that it was too over the top, that it was too girly. And so I actually had decided on a different one that didn't make my heart sing as much, but that was a little more toned down. And then I had a knit night with my friends, and I told them about it, and I pulled out the swatch. And they both thought that I should go with this one. And I realized that having a fear that something is too girly or too feminine, for me, a cis woman, is just internalized misogyny. and that I don't really need internalized misogyny dictating my knitting, and I should just go for what makes me happy, especially since I am dressing for myself most of the time. I very rarely need to adhere, to like a business professional dress code. That's the word, or anything. So there's really no reason for me not to just pick the combination that makes my heart sing. So I ripped it out and started over. And I decided to do corrugated ribbing on the bottom because I thought it would be really lovely for the cluster stitch to grow out of it. And I experimented on a swatch with how I wanted to do the ribbing with the cluster stitches and what would be the best kind of combination, especially since the band is knit on fewer stitches than the body. So I knew I'd be throwing in some increases around there. I have to admit, corrugated ribbing, not my favorite thing to knit in the world at all, actually. But I do really love the result. So it's worth it, and I'll probably do this for the button bands and neck bands as well. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to do the sleeves in the cluster stitch as well or not. I probably will. For the shaping, and in case you can't tell, I'm knitting the whole cardigan body as one piece. For the shaping, I considered doing traditional shaping where you increase stitches at the side seams and possibly in the middle and in the middles as princess seams. And this stitch is an 8-stitch repeat, so that was certainly doable. But I really kind of love the cohesive effect of the diamonds, and I didn't want to break that up. So instead of doing stitch increases, I did my shaping by needle sizes. So I knew that I wanted to get to size 3s because that was getting me the gauge that I liked for the overall fabric. I find with slip stitch type knitting that I really have to size up to get any kind of drapiness to the fabric, which is what I like in sweaters. And so I knew that I was going to end up at size 3s, and so I started, I think, at size 1s, and then every inch just increased a needle size. So now it is smooth sailing to the armholes. I started this in November, and then I needed to do some gift knitting for the holidays, so I put it away, and I've just pulled it out again. I had to take a break from knitting after, right around Christmas. I stopped knitting for a week and a half because I had been knitting a lot, and my hands were starting to get tingly. So, yeah, so now I'm wearing a wrist brace when I knit, and this kind of simple knitting, which is almost all plain knits, has proven quite easy with the wrist brace. So that way I just know that I'm not aggravating or creating any kind of carpal tunnel thing. So I picked this back up again last night, and hopefully I will be up at the armhole soon. I've been watching Bridgerton on Netflix, so that definitely has me very much enjoying the kind of over-the-top Rococo femininity as well, because that show really embraces that kind of look. Let's see, anything else? Oh, I wanted to just talk about the cluster quilting because this is so much fun. As I said, you can read the directions over at Knitting Fool, but basically these are elongated stitches, and the pattern calls for you to do double yarn overs, but I'm doing triple yarn overs because I really wanted a nice smooth fabric. So when I was swatching, that seemed to work best. And so you do those, and then you get to drop them down and cross them over. And because they're so elongated, there's really no risk of them going anywhere. And just having them all loose and then eventually picking them all up and then doing the little wraps, it's just so much fun for me. I enjoy that kind of knitting where it's a bit tricksy and I feel like I'm being clever, but I also don't have to actually put any yarn down. Whereas like the Latvian braids from the Tomton socks, you have to keep dropping and picking up yarn, and that is quite slow going. Whereas for me, this goes quite quickly while also feeling very kind of engaged. So yeah, I'm really pleased about this. I've had this yarn in my stash for quite a while. And the stitch marker, which I need to move up, is from Maria of Woolen Stitches, and it is this really sweet little pumpkin gemstone that my camera does not wish to focus on. No. you get the idea. She is Forest Charms over on Etsy, I believe, and she makes beautiful things. Okay. My final work in progress are some socks for myself. These are not from the Silk Road Socks book. I took a break. Instead, they are the Paddington Station Socks by Ambrose Smith. I'm pretty sure her Instagram is Ambrose Knits, so that's why I was getting confused. And I am almost finished with the first one. I'm about halfway through a barn toe, which is, I do a modified barn toe so that it also is decreasing more quickly on my pinky toe side and more slowly on my big toe side, but that's my favorite kind of toe. And it's just where you do a more staggered decrease rate to have a more gradual toe. And this is another one of Maria's stitch markers. This one's a snowflake. There we go. And yeah, these, I used to have a pair of dark chocolate brown socks, which is what this is, like a cool chocolate brown, because a lot of my winter wardrobe was cool browns. I love them. They're so foresty, but because they're cooler, they still work with my complexion. But unfortunately, they just started falling apart. So I'm knitting myself, like I darned them, and then I had to darn the darns, and then it got to the point where they were just done. So I'm knitting myself a new pair in a pretty sturdy yarn, and I decided that I really just wanted a kind of simple texture pattern, and I knit them extra long so they can go with my ankle boots no problem. And the Paddington Station socks are a really fun texture. It's just a 4-round repeat, so it's very easy to memorize, and I just love how knobbly it is. Reminds me of acorns or something. Let's see if I hold it. Can you see all those purl stitches? Like I said, I substituted in my own heel and toe, so I'm not really sure if that's what the pattern calls for. It comes in quite a few sizes, which is really nice, and I'm knitting the 60 stitch size. And Ambrose Smith is another one that has tiered pricing to be economically inclusive, and several sizes to be body inclusive, and also she does sock patterns inspired by English literature that I enjoy too. So these are her Agatha Christie collection, and the 450 to Paddington is one of my favorite Agatha Christie novels. It's a Miss Marple one. First of all, I'd like to point out that Nessie, the teenage puppy, has finally calmed down. She is good like 80% of the time, but the other 20% of the time, there we go. But the other 20% of the time, whew, she's a bundle of chaos. So I do apologize for all the background noise in the beginning. She's getting better. She's grown up. She's a year and a half now. So the book is Lavinia by Ursula K. LeGuin, who I have read a little bit of, but I would definitely like to read more of. And so I opted for this one because it's inspired by a character from the Aeneid. And I really love modern novels that play with classics. I love, particularly if they're in the kind of feminist reimaginings. Margaret Atwood did the Penelopead, which is incredible, especially the audiobook, the chorus of the Hanged Maids. Whew, so creepy. And Madeline Miller has done Circe, and another one about Achilles, I think, but I've read Circe and loved that. So when I saw that Ursula K. Le Guin had Lavinia, I decided to go ahead and read that, and it was wonderful. I'll talk about it more next week, but if you enjoy this kind of thing, you will definitely enjoy it. So, the first quotation. I spent the next day alone in the forest of Albunea. The air was heavy under the trees, and the sulfur smell stopped my breath when I went near the springs. Wandering away, I found a path up the steep hill, almost a crag that rises up above the forest. Clearings at the top gave a wide view west to the bright line that was the sea. I sat up there in the sunlight in the thin grass, my back against a fallen log. I had my spindle and a bag of wool. A woman usually carries some of her penates with her, and penates are the household spirits. I was spinning the very finest thread for a summer toga or a pala, so my light bag of wool would last me a good while. I sat and spun and thought and gazed out over the hills and woods of Latium, all green with May. I just think that that's such a beautiful scene. And yeah. And then the second quotation is much shorter, but it really, I found that it was a very strong kind of passage, so hopefully you'll like it too. What am I to do now? I've lost my guide, my Virgil. I must go on by myself through all that is left after the end, all the rest of the immense, pathless, unreadable world. What is left after a death? Everything else. The sun a man saw rise goes down, though he does not see it set. A woman sits down to the weaving, another woman left in the loom. Yeah. Hopefully you enjoy those passages as much as I did. And like I said, I promise I'll talk more about Lavinia next week. But if that has already intrigued you, it is a novel by Ursula K. LeGuin. All I think I have left now is talking about how to organize works in progress and answering a couple more viewers' questions. So first, Orion's question was, what is my favorite make of 2020? And this one I finished in January, so I knit quite a bit of it in 2019, but I have worn it so much in 2020, so I'm still counting it. And it is my storybook scarf. So this is a Fair Isle style colorwork scarf. I love it so much. Oh, these colors. This light is not doing these colors justice, but yeah. Oh, it smells like wood smoke because we've been doing fire pits. I wear it all the time. I have enough yarn left over that I could knit a matching vest or leg warmers or something like that, or like dog sweaters. And I'm torn about what to do with all that, or gloves. Gloves would be nice. But this basically, it's the only scarf I wear. And it's my favorite make of 2020. I will try to insert some better photos of it so that you can actually see the colors, since winter light is not the best for that. And then Jenny asked, what was I doing during my hiatus and the lockdown with COVID over the last year? So I already spoke in my reply to Joe about kind of what philosophical musings I was undertaking during my hiatus, about what I want to create in social media and what I want to put out there and all that kind of thing. Obviously, I grew my hair during COVID because I was isolating as someone who's disabled and is on immune suppressing drugs. I have been trying very hard to stay home as much as possible, so haircuts just didn't seem worth it. And for a long time, it was driving me nuts, but now it's kind of growing on me. So we'll see. Maybe I'll stick with it for a while. And I did a lot of reading this year, both book reading and also activist online reading, which I'm very grateful for, all the activists who put out so much content online. I started using tarot cards again. I was very much into tarot when I was in high school, which was a long time ago now because I'm 34. And I had saved a couple of my decks, I think, at least one of them. And then I got myself a new, more inclusive deck for my birthday, and I've been having a really good time playing with the cards again. Trying to train Nessie, which it's going well. And yeah, for a while I was going for nice long walks, but then my arthritis really put a stop to that. So luckily, the house that Joel and I live in has a porch. So I was still able to get outdoor time, sort of outdoor time that way. And playing board games with Joel, but mainly solo board games. And then playing D&D online. And that's pretty much what I've been up to. Honestly, obviously this pandemic is horrible, and I deeply wish it hadn't happened. but there are things that are a lot more accessible to me as a chronically ill person who already can't leave the house too often because it causes me a lot of pain. So I got to watch a lot more talks that I wouldn't have been able to go to before and participate in social events online through Zoom. We did dog training classes through Zoom, all that kind of stuff. So in some ways, 2020 granted me more opportunities than I've had for quite a while. But like I said, I don't wish the pandemic on anyone. And if I could go back in time and eliminate it, of course I would. And I was very fortunate to be able to stay home and self-isolate. I know that a lot of people couldn't because they needed their paychecks and they had jobs that required them to go out. Luckily, Joel was able to transition to working from home, so we didn't have to worry about him putting me more at risk. And of course, I really missed my family, and we had to cancel a lot of trips and that kind of thing. But overall, I was very fortunate to have a very minor challenges, really, in 2020 compared to most of the world. So that's what I was up to. To transition to a lighter note, I would also just like to talk about how you organize your knitting projects. For a long time, I just kept them all in a basket because I liked being able to look at them and being able to kind of pick them up easily and that kind of thing. But now I live with a teenage puppy, and she is pretty good about leaving my knitting alone, like 95% of the time. But there is that 5% chance that she'll decide that she just needs to go for it. She doesn't eat yarn, thank goodness, but she does like paper. So if there's a label around the yarn, she went for one of those a few months ago and managed to break a needle. Anyway, so now my works in progress live in project bags, and luckily I had a few that have been kindly gifted to me by viewers, or a couple that I got myself. And as I started using them more frequently, I got really into putting like the little notions that I need. I used to just keep all my notions in one bag, and then I would just use that bag whenever I needed it. But that was when I lived in a studio apartment, and now I live in a house, and it's 2 stories, and stairs are rough for me. I don't think anyone likes doing stairs. Anyway, so rather than have my notions all in one bag, I've started kind of splitting them up. So this is always going to be my sock project bag. And so in addition to my sock needles, it has a stitch holder for when I do the heels, and 2 little stitch markers. Is that what they're called? Yes. That my friend Kristen gave me. They're little hedgehogs. She got them at a local Fiber Fest back when we could go to those things. Anyway, for when I'm doing the gusset decreases. And so I always have those tools, and I've got a spare progress keeper on the zipper pull in case I need to access that. And I would like to actually get some more tape measures because I only have 1 tape measure right now, and I find that sometimes I have to move it between bags. But I've got my ruler in my sweater bag to check on my gauge and that kind of thing. This is only big enough for a sweater because I knit sweaters in pieces. But I've got a bigger bag, and I've got tote bags and that kind of thing. And yeah, I'm really kind of won over to keeping my knitting in bags now. I can see the appeal. It took me a while to realize I could just leave tools loose with the yarn and nothing would happen. And so I'm curious, do you keep your knitting in bags, in baskets? When I was knitting my scarf, actually, my storybook scarf, obviously it has a lot of different colors, I think 8, 9. So I had a lot of balls of yarn. So this lived in a tote bag so that I always had the color yarn that I needed. And I also left a yarn needle in there for weaving in the ends. Oh, and that's something else that I have in my sock knitting bag. That's something else that I have in my sock knitting bag is a yarn needle so that I can graft the toes at the end. And I would like to do more color work, and especially more Fair Isle style color work with a lot of color changes this year. So I'm sure that I'll be using bags for that. However, I do still have my knitting basket. If you've been a long time viewer, you know what basket I'm talking about because I used to use it for my title cards. It's out of reach, but it's right there. And that's where I keep most of my bags and projects. I do keep one downstairs in the living room. We are upstairs in my sitting room, which is both kind of my office with the desk and also couch, because our only bathroom is on the second floor. And so when I'm in a lot of pain, it's easier to have a couch on the same floor. It's the bathroom. Anyway, so this, my sock bag, it lives in between the couch cushions, because usually I sit in the center part of the sectional. That's why there's a lamp over there, so that I can knit and see. And when I sit down, really, once I start sitting down, the pets are all trying to sit on my lap. And so if I sit down and they've all got themselves sorted and I've got myself hooked into 2 heating pads, and then I realize that I left my knitting in the basket on the far end of the couch, it's really sad. So just keeping a knitting project tucked into the cushions where I can reach them even when I've sat down, because even the coffee table is not an easy reach for me. I have a very limited reach. Anyway, has just proven really nice. So that is, and that was actually why I started keeping it in a bag, was because I knew I didn't want loose knitting in the couch. That would be way too much temptation for Nessie. And it worked so well that I've started keeping everything in bags. And now I even, especially when I couldn't knit for a week and a half, I was kind of planning what I was going to knit next and starting those projects. And now I've started using other bags to keep all those yarn and like gauge and that kind of stuff, like needles that I think I might need, all together in a bag so that I can just get up and go. And I have found that just adding a bit of organization just makes it that much more smooth to swap projects. And so I am less likely to get stuck in knitting limbo because I don't have anything to knit. I've also been trying to keep ahead of winding yarn, which is another thing that used to sometimes leave me in knitting limbo. But that does not have anything to do with organization. So, do you organize your works in progress in bags, baskets, drawers? Something else that hasn't even occurred to me? And how many notions do you have? Because I feel like I need at least 3 tape measures, at least 2, one for downstairs and one for upstairs, but 3 would be nice, because then I could have one in each bag. I tend to have 3 projects going at once. It has been so wonderful chatting with you again. And thank you so much for sitting down and watching. I am so grateful to everyone that takes the time to like my videos and to leave comments here on YouTube, or message me and leave comments on pictures over on Instagram. I am the Charm of It on Instagram, Ravelry, Library Thing, which is where I'll be recording my books, Gmail, and here on YouTube. So if you need to get in touch with me, that's really all you need to know. I won't be doing very extensive show notes anymore, but I am subtitling everything, so hopefully you can just pause and write down if you need to get some information. Don't forget to enter the giveaway if you would like to for the Ripple Butt shorts, and I will see you again next week. Take care!